as for the Jahan Dotson discourse, it's been interesting now. We're over 24 hours from the trade. And the biggest gripe seems to still be from most people that don't like it or have reservations that the Washington Commanders traded him to the Philadelphia Eagles within the division. And I genuinely find a lot of this discourse laughable, Anthony, for a couple of reasons. And the main one is, if they thought Jahan Dotson was so good at football, not what they thought he could be, not what you thought he could be, not you, Anthony, you person out there who saw Jahan Dotson score a bunch as a rookie and were like, dang, this kid's going to keep growing and it's going to be awesome. If they thought he was that dude with that upside, they're not trading him. So in some ways, this is going to come down to what they've seen and what they know in their projection and how Jahan Dotson fits in their scheme versus how he fits in Philadelphia. And I don't know what the reasons are that Jahan Dotson has not been the same guy since the beginning of last year, but I think they look at it and they're like, we know here he's not going to be the same guy that we all maybe feared. You know, if you're Dan Quinn and you're in Dallas trying to guard him when he was a rookie, that he's not going to be that guy in Washington. Something's not clicking. Something's not right. He clearly needs a refresh. But I'd also say this, Anthony. The thing that actually, I can't remember who made this comment. I think it was a YouTube commenter, so I apologize for not writing that down and shouting you out, whoever made this astute point. They have watched Jahan Dotson in the slot primarily for the entirety of camp. And the idea Jahan's going to cook the Washington Commanders specifically, and they're going to regret this trade. If Jahan Dotson was going to cook the Washington Commanders, with all due respect to Jahan, wouldn't he have been cooking their defense the entirety of the time? I'm pretty sure that they've watched Mike Sainristil as a rookie do just fine against Jahan Dotson, and that Dan Quinn isn't going to lose sleep the week of the Eagles because he thinks that Mike Sainristil all of a sudden can't cover Jahan Dotson. And, by the way, it's the same Dan Quinn and the same Joe Witt Jr. who have, for 2 years, game planned for him as coaches for the Dallas Cowboys. So they are familiar. They've seen it every single day. And they still were like, yeah, give us that third-round pick. So, again, could they be wrong? Could the reset in scenery be the thing that Jahan needs to reset himself? All possibilities. So I'm not going to sit here and arrogantly guarantee that this doesn't in any way, shape, or form bite the Commanders over the next couple of years that Jahan's an Eagle. He could score against them. He's very good at finding the end zone. He's a talented kid. And I personally, as a human being, wish Jahan Dotson the absolute best. But if they thought he was going to be awesome, they wouldn't have traded him. And they have seen him play the Washington Commanders every single day for the last month and a half. And they decided, we're good. He can go to Philly.
But do you think people are more upset about trading to a division rival or the compensation in which we got for Jahan?
I think there's people that are upset at both. I think that there's people that think he's worth more, and I would be hard-pressed to say that they're correct based off of the market of NFL trades, which, again, is multifactorial and very complicated because there are significantly better and more accomplished players than Jahan Dotson who got less compensation. But their contracts are significantly more, and that has to do a lot with the compensation. So, you get a third for Jahan and have to give up the fifth because he's got 2 years remaining at extraordinarily cheap money, meaning he's a very, very buy low asset. And one that, unlike a lot of the times that these types of players get traded, you don't have to pay him immediately. They've got a year to make a decision in Philadelphia on Jahan Dotson based off where he is contractually. So, Jahan's a good asset, which is why you get a good asset and a third-round pick in return. So I do think that that's part of it, but the in-division stuff is definitely something that I've seen quite a bit over the last, 24 hours since we've been talking about this and some of the discourse and listening to calls and to our other shows and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think to your point about, Joe Witt Jr. and, everybody, preparing to have already schemed up for Jahan, I think, again, they don't make that decision without. And Cliff said it yesterday. They did consult him. He didn't really get into the specifics, but I think, he was okay with moving off of Jahan. But also, I think this also goes back to the point you had raised, I want to say like a week or two ago, about the physicality that Cliff Kingsbury's receivers, the kind of players that he want. Jahan, I went back to watch both games. Like, even in the last game against the Dolphins, he failed to, really get a good block. And yesterday, Cliff was talking about Olamide Zaccheaus and how, he's willing to do anything and go out there and make a solid block. So, again, I think they know exactly what they want. I don't think Jahan fit that mode. And at this point, he wasn't, like, killing us. So I think we just got to charge to the game. And, we'll see him 2 times this season. I think everybody's going to look forward to that matchup against Jahan.
And sometimes these decisions are really hard, right? Because I bet you there's a piece of Adam Peters that is scared that Jahan, maybe this is the motivation he needed. Maybe 30 years from now, the Jahan Dotson life story, comes out and, he's like, man, that trade from Washington is the wake-up call that I needed. Yep. Like, that's possible. But if he needed that wake-up call, you can't give it to him without trading him. Like, you have to evaluate what a player is going to be for you. You can't play or waste energy, waste time, waste resources guessing what he could be somewhere else. I think they had a really good idea what Jahan was going to be for them, which is nothing more than a rotational piece. And at that point, if you feel like you can get, a rotational piece in the 3rd round, easy, and we get multiple more years of contractual control, and we open up reps for McCaffrey and Diami and Zaccheaus, who we trust more, and we're trying to figure out what they are, like that is, it kind of becomes a no-brainer. And so, again, I don't know what exactly happened with Jahan, because he is a guy that had a ton of promise. I think he had the right mental makeup. And frankly, last year during training camp, he was awesome. And he had a bad year. The head hasn't been in the game seemingly since. And if you had asked me this time last year, hey, a year from now, there's a really great coaching staff that comes in that preaches competitiveness. Will Jahan Dotson adapt to it? I'd be like, yeah, obviously. And he just didn't. And so the last little piece of this, though, that I'll say, Anthony, too, I was on with JP earlier today, and he asked me about this, and I thought it was a great point. Like, everyone loves to kill Rivera because the draft picks, specifically in the 1st round, weren't good. And then you trade one of them, and everyone's like, how could you trade that 1st round? Like, how do those two thoughts go together in people's heads? I don't really understand that one. So I'm going to let people chew on that here in the commercial break.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.